So we're not alone. It looks like we're alone, but we're not. I'm not the only one, you're not the only ones who believe that art is the way to the future. There are lots of people who are talking about this, and this is part of what the paradigm shift is all about. The first person who started talking about this, well, many, but Dan Pink. Have any of you heard of Dan Pink? Great. He has a really interesting theory that it's no longer a theory, it is a reality, which is that artists and creatives are actually the new class for the United States. They're the ones who are going to make our economy thrive because we are innovative, we are unique, we are the ones who do things that everyone wants to buy. We're the reason people want United States products are because they're cool and interesting and unique. And guess what? That's our job. That's our menu, is the art world. So he started talking about how creativity could really make a difference. At the same time, Thomas Friedman is an economist and a reporter. He's done some wonderful things to explain how the technology has totally changed the way that we interact with one another. Markets are completely different. And suddenly you can find people who want the kind of art that you make anywhere in the world with relatively little effort and relatively little investment on your part. And to flatten the world is a pretty powerful piece of technology that we can take advantage of. Then, in the last year, a really interesting book. I highly encourage all of these books, and copies of the books are all over there. Don't take them, they're all mine. But you can look at them and drool on them. The Abundance book is really fascinating. This is it's written by two men who have spent most of their lives in innovation and reporting as well. And their theory is, and they have lots of proof to back it up, that we're in a better place right now economically and in terms of the kinds of poverty issues, water issues, healthcare, medical issues. We have a better chance right now of solving these problems for good than we ever have before. And why are we so obsessed with how negative everything is and how awful everything is? When in reality, if you look back at the last 150 years, the amount of change that we have accomplished as a society is extraordinary. There are more people in the middle class, even though it doesn't feel like it right now, but in the world than there ever have been before. Life expectancy is way up. Doesn't mean that the problems are solved, but we're close because of the way people are thinking. They're using innovation to think about the world differently and to solve problems differently. So be happy that we're in this moment. And then Seth Godin is a really fun guy, and if you get a chance to go to his website, sethgodin.com, he has tons of books, but he also has a great blog that's, like 10 sentences a day that he writes, but they're brilliant every single time. I don't know how he does it, but I guess if that's all you do, maybe you can get really good at it. But he's a brilliant thinker, and he has sold millions of books. He has allegedly the most popular blog in the world. More people read his blog than any other blog, and he's one of us. He is someone who believes in art. He's an artist himself in the way that he thinks and the way that he writes, but he believes that we're the key, that we are the answer, and that the more we can support each other and the more we can learn how to live in this world that hasn't always supported us, the more we can find language to talk to each other, the more success we're all going to have together. So, what is this all about in reality, though? Where'd this come from? So, 150 years ago, although not quite that long ago in Fort Collins, the factory economy was completely different. All we valued from workers was do the job, stand in that line, don't get out of line, be the cog in the wheel. Being creative was not a part of what we were supposed to do. And so most of our education and our job training is all about being in a line. It's not about being creative. And yet now is this time when we recognize that creativity is what makes the difference for most companies, certainly for the way that we change policies and think about community development. Being creative in those places is so much more effective. And so finally, we're really in a place that's very different. We're in the new economy where we really have a chance to shine as artists and where we have a chance to be human. We are the folks who are going to make the difference for the rest of the world. We have heart, we have spirit, we have creativity and innovation that makes people communicate better and touch one another in a different way, we laugh together, we cry together, and celebrating things together as artists makes us the folks who are the ones who can get things done. So the reason that we're here today, though, is because of AIR. And we want to tell you a little bit about what AIR is all about and how it came about, because it sort of is the paradigm shift in itself. We're here because you're special. You're the ones who are part of the solution. And we're here to help you make that happen. We're here to give you better skills, to be better artists and to be better community members, better business people, and who really embrace this idea that creativity and the way that we communicate together can make all the difference in the world. So AIR actually came out of a local problem, which many of you here may experience, which is that artists have not been valued as much as they need to be, whether it's financially or whether it's our position in society, our position in our own local government. And many folks who are in the room here have been a part of that fight for decades, who have gotten us to this moment today. We're standing proudly on everyone's shoulders who did that work. To start this conversation and to start the funding that's allowed this sort of piece to move forward. But what we realized in Fort Collins was that we didn't have time or money that could allow for us to really sustain our artists in a meaningful way, because it's so expensive to do professional development. And this is what we heard from artists was, if there's anything we need, we need to learn how to do our jobs better so that we can make more money, so that we can be more fulfilled in our society. And so we started looking around, and we had some early partners. CSU, or Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins joined right away, and CSU. We all came together in a really interesting moment when CSU was realizing that their graduates were leaving their industry. 90% of them, after 2 years of graduation, are out of their degree programs as a profession. And so they wanted to change the way that they were thinking about how to teach. And we were thinking about this too. So that partnership really began. And then the city brought along this fabulous Carnegie building that we're proud to be moving into, knock on some faux wood here somewhere, before the end of the year. But what a fabulous place to do the kind of work that we're talking about. But the amazing thing is, as soon as we started talking about this idea, which was, how can we share professional development, invest in one place, use technology to share in a broader area, we started having states who were interested in what we were doing. And Nevada was the first state that jumped on board, even before Colorado. Don't tell Colorado. But even before Colorado, they were part of our NEA grant application, as was Colorado Creative Industries. But they really understand the idea that rural communities, and we consider ourselves rural because we are rural, believe it or not, we are. We're not Denver, and we're proud, I think, of that. But even smaller communities, of course, really struggle with this. How can they invest in the arts when so much of this work is so expensive? So we started adding partners to the program, and all of a sudden we had 10 states that were sort of part of this vision. That's 280,000 creatives live in the 10 states that AIR will serve. And those are tax records that say that. So that's not the under-the-table money that we're talking about. Those are real folks who believe either in reporting the amount that they're making as an artist, or also they're actually a graphic designer, or they're in design industries. But that's a big number, and all of a sudden it made us realize that we really had something here, and that if we could invest in great curriculum and great ways to connect each other, we could start building stronger communities in the rural West. So this is when the NEA came in. They loved this idea. They have trouble, as do many, figuring out how to invest in the Inner Mountain West, because we live in these little pockets, and this is actually something that people could understand and grab onto. So those funders made a big difference. Then we added more states. As we did planning last fall, all of these states actually were a part of our initial conversations to confirm that what we were doing actually made sense. And to have 9 of our 10 states on board immediately was a huge signal that we were on the right track. So in January, we started working with the public and with many of you. We held a couple of different public meetings, multiple arts and drafts were done around the idea of curriculum design, and we had an amazing team of 20 people, many of whom are in the room today, who spent once a week for 3.5 months time helping us figure out what this curriculum was that could join us together. And as soon as we started working, we realized that if we were just focused on marketing, we weren't going to solve problems. We had to actually take on systemic change. And the idea that we could actually communicate with artists and non-creatives, people who actually are creative, but don't know it yet, that we could actually change the way that we value art and creativity in our own community. And that was a big part of the shift that began to happen for all of us. So we spent, as I said, several months working on this together. And then we started getting even more funders. Again, to have the Tremaine Foundation come on board and Americans for the Arts now finally has been an amazing journey. So the other thing that's interesting though here, I think, is that we're in Fort Collins, and we luckily actually live here. But Fort Collins has something very special. We certainly moved here because of the art and the creativity that was happening here. That is literally why we moved here. When we saw that there were 5 theater companies, we were like, wow, how is that possible that there are 5? There were 5 at the time. There was a moment in time, I swear to you guys. There was an article written in the Denver Post about how Fort Collins had a better theater scene than Denver. 2002. It's why we moved here. And the music scene, again, and I had no idea of the visual arts community because it wasn't obvious when we moved here 10 years ago. There were some galleries, but everyone has some galleries, but had no idea the number of people who were making art in this community. So Fort Collins does have something very special that we all live here for. Part of it is actually our land. I think that there is something magical and amazing that happens here that makes people move here because they want to have a better life, they want to feel better, and they want to invest in their community in a different way. But this is a hard clicker. But the thing that also makes Fort Collins really special is its history. And I don't know whether all of you are aware of the history of Fort Collins, but 20 miles north of the city of Fort Collins is an amazing piece of land. The Lindenmeyer site is actually at Soapstone Prairie. It's now a natural area owned by the city of Fort Collins, and the county owns Red Mountain, which is right next door to it. And at the Lindenmeyer site, really, there's no accident, I think, about why what is happening here today in Fort Collins is happening. Because the beginnings of history, the beginning of civilization happened 20 miles from here. So in the 1920s and 1930s, excavations were done at the Lindenmeyer site. The collection is now at the Smithsonian, at the Denver or Colorado State Historical Museum, and also there's certainly pieces that are here locally at the History Museum that is not open yet, again, as well. But what was found there were Folsom points. And you know, Folsom points had recently been found in Folsom, New Mexico. But what was amazing about the Lindenmeyer site is that the Folsom point were actually found in the Bison Antiquus. Is that how you say that right now? Okay, close enough. Which actually allowed us to date the age, because we knew the age of the species that's now extinct. And at 13,000 years ago, people were living on our land. They were hunting, they were living together, they were gathering, and I think this is what gives me chills every time I think about it. They were gathering, and some of the oldest beads, carved beads in North America were found at this site. 13,000-year-old art, hunting, communal gathering. And that this happened 20 miles from here explains to me why we're here today, because the spirit of all of this is clearly coming out. People are drawn here in an amazing way.